In creating things for your scenes, whether working on something 2 or 3-dimensional, you're going to find yourself constantly needing to reshape the things that you've made. One of the reasons that 3ds Max has gained such a wide acceptance as an industrial-strength 3D application is because of its robust modeling toolset, allowing that reshaping process to be done both efficiently and typically fast. Before being able to capitalize, though, on the software's modeling prowess, it's going to be necessary to learn the jargon that Max uses in labeling certain things. You got to be able to talk the talk, in other words. Now, that language in part starts by understanding that each and every thing you make will consist of a bunch of smaller little pieces or parts of geometry that, in essence, tie together to create the surface that make each object look the way that it does. Those smaller parts are collectively referred to as sub-object components, and can be moved, scaled, or rotated in order to change the look or shape of what you're working on. Now, to understand what we're going to be talking about here, it's important that we get comfortable using a couple of specific terms that you'll be constantly using when working in Max. Vocabulary that serves as the software's language. First off, we need to make a distinction between the actual terms that 3ds Max uses to describe both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional things in a scene. When Max thinks of something 2D, it officially refers to that as a shape. When working with something 3D, Max refers to that as an object. So from here on out, when I refer to a shape, I'm going to be talking about something that's 2-dimensional. And when I use the word object, I'll be specifically referring to something that's 3-dimensional. Now, when you're talking about those little sub-object components, those too will have specific names, labels that are essential to remember. Let's take a look at what we'll be dealing with. When talking about 2-dimensional shapes, you'll be working with 3 different sub-object components. Their names are vertex, segment, and spline. Let's first take a look at the vertex. A vertex is simply a point in space that connects other sub-object components together to form, in this case, a line. So, vertex when referring to one, and vertice when referring to 2 or more. So vertices are connected together by segments, and at the end of each segment, you'll find a vertex. The last component on a 2D shape is what you get when the vertices and segments combine together to form a line. Max refers to that line as a spline. So a spline is basically made up of a series of vertices and segments. Now be aware that shapes can actually consist of many splines, all depending on how that shape's been created. So you'll at times be working on shapes that are made up of a single spline, and at other times you'll be working on shapes consisting of several splines. We'll be looking at how all that works when we get to creating a few shapes. Now the story changes a bit as far as those sub-object names when dealing with 3D objects. Here again, you'll have vertices that nail down specific individual points in space. But the lines that connect those vertices together when working on something 3D are no longer referred to as segments. They're instead called edges. Now, on most types of 3D surfaces you'll be creating in Max, those little surfaces and edges then lock together to form 3-sided triangles. When the triangle fills with a skin, you have something called a face. So edges are connected by vertices, and as they tie together, they form small little 3-sided triangles. The triangles then fill with a surface that's referred to as a face. Now there's one other term you'll be using, one you might have heard of before, and that is polygon, or poly for short. A polygon is simply 2 or more faces that connect sitting side by side. That combination of faces combined together form a shape that consists of 4 or more sides. That area is referred to as a polygon. So it's really just another way of saying 2 or more neighboring faces that have an edge in common. That's a poly. Now every bit of what I've mentioned here is important stuff. You're going to be working down at the sub-object level pretty much every time you open Max. So remember the terms, what specifically sub-object means, and the individual names that we've given to those smaller pieces and parts. If you want to get the most out of 3ds Max, remembering that stuff and working at that level will be essential.